I was standing in my backyard, admiring the koi pond I'd spent 3 months building when I heard the sharp clicking of heels on my driveway, and somehow I knew my peaceful Saturday morning was about to get ruined. "Excuse me, Mr. Keller, Frank Keller." The voice was shrill enough to scatter the birds from my oak tree. I turned around to see Patricia Newsome marching toward me, clipboard in hand, her blonde bob bouncing with each aggressive step. She was the president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, and she took that position more seriously than most people take their actual jobs. "Patricia," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "what can I do for you?" She stopped at the edge of my deck, her eyes scanning my backyard like a general surveying enemy territory. When her gaze landed on my pond, her lips pressed into a thin line that could have cut glass. "That," she said, pointing at my beautiful water feature with a manicured nail, "is a violation of our HOA regulations. Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 3 clearly states that any water features exceeding 10 square feet require board approval. That monstrosity must be at least 40 square feet. I felt my jaw clench. Actually, it's 35 square feet, and I wasn't aware I needed approval for landscaping on my own property. Ignorance of the rules doesn't excuse you from following them." She flipped through papers on her clipboard. "I'm issuing you a formal violation notice. You have 30 days to remove it or you'll face daily fines of $100. $100 a day." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Patricia, come on, it's just a pond." "It's not hurting anyone. Rules are rules, Frank. The HOA exists to maintain property values and community standards. Your unauthorized construction compromises both." She tore off a yellow sheet from her clipboard and thrust it at me. "30 days. Have a nice weekend." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with a violation notice in one hand and my coffee growing cold in the other. I looked back at my pond, where 6 beautiful koi fish swam lazily through the clear water, completely oblivious to the bureaucratic nightmare that was about to unfold. I'd moved to Meadowbrook Hills 2 years ago, right after my divorce from Sarah. The house had been a fresh start, a chance to build something that was entirely mine. The neighborhood was nice enough, with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns, but I'd quickly learned that Patricia ran the HOA like a small dictatorship. She'd already sent me violation notices for leaving my trash cans out 4 hours too long, and for having a welcome mat that was apparently the wrong shade of brown. But this was different. The pond had been a labor of love. I designed it myself, spent weekends digging and laying stones, installing the filtration system, and carefully selecting plants that would create a balanced ecosystem. My 10-year-old daughter, Emma, loved visiting on weekends and feeding the fish. It was one of the few things that had brought me genuine peace since the divorce. I wasn't about to let Patricia take that away without a fight. Monday morning, I called the HOA office and scheduled a meeting with the board for the following Thursday. The secretary, a kind woman named Martha, sounded sympathetic when I explained the situation. "Between you and me," she said quietly, "Patricia's been on a rampage lately. She issued 17 violation notices last month alone. People are getting fed up. Is there any way to fight this? You can present your case to the board. Bring documentation, photos, anything that shows your pond is actually beneficial to the property. Sometimes they'll overturn Patricia's decisions if you make a good enough argument." That gave me an idea. I spent the next few days researching water features and their impact on property values. What I found surprised even me. According to multiple real estate studies, well-designed water features could increase property values by anywhere from 5 to 15%. They were considered premium landscaping elements that buyers actively sought out. I compiled everything into a presentation, complete with before and after photos of my backyard, cost breakdowns, and data from comparable home sales in the area. I even got a letter from a local real estate agent, Tom Bradley, who confirmed that my pond would likely increase my home's value by at least $10,000. Thursday evening arrived faster than I expected. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a bland building near the neighborhood entrance. When I walked into the conference room, I found Patricia sitting at the head of a long table, flanked by 4 other board members. I recognized 2 of them. David Sherman, a retired accountant who lived 3 streets over, and Jennifer Moss, a teacher who'd always seemed reasonable in our brief interactions. "Mr. Keller," Patricia said, not bothering with pleasantries. "You requested this hearing to contest your violation notice. You have 15 minutes to present your case." I set up my laptop and pulled up my presentation. "Thank you all for your time. I'm here because I believe the violation notice I received is not only unjust, but also contradicts the HOA's stated goal of maintaining property values." For the next 12 minutes, I walked them through everything I'd learned. I showed them the research data, the photos of my pond, and Tom Bradley's letter. I explained how the pond had transformed my barren backyard into an oasis that attracted birds and butterflies, creating a peaceful environment that enhanced not just my property, but the entire neighborhood's aesthetic appeal. Patricia's face grew more pinched with each slide. When I finished, she didn't even pause before responding. "This is all very interesting, Mr. Keller, but it's irrelevant. You violated our regulations by not seeking approval before construction. The board's authority exists for a reason. If we allow you to circumvent the process, it sets a dangerous precedent." "But the regulation itself seems arbitrary," I countered. "Why does a water feature over 10 square feet require approval? What's the reasoning behind that specific threshold?" "The reasoning is that we established it as a rule." Patricia's voice had taken on a condescending tone. "This board spent months developing our community guidelines. We don't need to justify every decision to individual homeowners who think they are above the rules." David Sherman cleared his throat. "Actually, Patricia, I think Frank raises a valid point. Looking at his documentation, it does appear the pond has improved his property. Maybe we should consider granting retroactive approval." "Absolutely not," Patricia snapped. "That would completely undermine the HOA's authority." Jennifer Moss leaned forward, studying the photos on the screen. "I have to admit, the pond does look professionally done, and these property value statistics are compelling. Maybe we could establish a process for retroactive approval in cases like this." "Jennifer, we already have a process. It's called following the rules before you build something." Patricia turned to the other 2 board members who hadn't spoken yet. "Mark, Susan, surely you see the problem here." Mark Williams, a lawyer who lived at the end of Oakwood Drive, had been taking notes. "I actually agree with David and Jennifer. The bylaws give us discretionary power to grant variances when they serve the community's interest. If Frank's pond increases property values, that benefits everyone in the neighborhood." Susan Harper, the 5th board member, nodded slowly. "I drove by Frank's house yesterday to see the pond for myself. It really is beautiful. My husband and I have been thinking about adding a water feature to our yard. If Frank's research is accurate, maybe we should be encouraging this kind of improvement." Patricia's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is ridiculous. We have rules for a reason. 4 board members can't just decide to ignore them because they like how something looks." "We're not ignoring the rules," Mark said calmly. We're exercising our authority to interpret them in the community's best interest. I move that we grant Frank retroactive approval for his pond and dismiss the violation notice. I second that motion, David said immediately. Patricia looked like she wanted to flip the table. This sets a terrible precedent. You're essentially telling every homeowner in Meadowbrook Hills that they can do whatever they want and apologize later. That's not what we're saying at all, Jennifer interjected. We're saying that when a homeowner makes a good faith improvement that demonstrably benefits the community, we have the discretion to approve it. Frank did extensive research and built something high quality. That's different from someone throwing up a shed without permits. Fine, Patricia bit out. Let's vote. All in favor of granting retroactive approval. 4 hands went up. Only Patricia abstained, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Motion carries, Mark said. Frank, your pond is approved. The violation notice is dismissed. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to consider the facts. Thank you for putting together such a thorough presentation, Jennifer said with a smile. You made it easy for us to make the right decision. I gathered my laptop and started to leave, but Patricia's voice stopped me at the door. This isn't over, Mr. Keller. I'll be watching your property very carefully from now on. Any violation, no matter how small, and you'll be hearing from me. I turned back to look at her. I follow the rules, Patricia. All I ask is that they be applied fairly. I left the community center feeling victorious but also uneasy. Patricia wasn't the type to let a defeat go unchallenged. I had a feeling I'd just made a very determined enemy. The next few weeks were blissfully quiet. Emma came over for her regular weekend visits, and we spent hours by the pond. I taught her about the nitrogen cycle and how the plants filtered the water naturally. She named each of the koi and insisted on feeding them every morning she stayed with me. Dad, can we get more fish? She asked one sunny Saturday in March. Maybe some that are different colors. Maybe, I said, watching her carefully sprinkle food across the water's surface. We need to make sure the pond can support more fish first. It's all about balance. Like how you balanced winning against the mean HOA lady, I laughed. Something like that, yeah. But my sense of security was shattered 3 weeks after the board meeting. I came home from work to find another violation notice stuck to my front door. This one cited me for having grass that exceeded the maximum allowable height of 3 inches. I walked around to my front yard and stared at my lawn. It looked identical to every other lawn on the street. I even got down with a tape measure and confirmed that my grass was exactly 2.5 inches tall, well within the acceptable range. The next day, another notice appeared. This one claimed my house numbers were the wrong color. They were black, which was exactly what the HOA guidelines specified. I took photos and sent them to Martha at the HOA office, along with a copy of the relevant regulation. I'm sorry, Frank, she said when I called to follow up. Patricia has been very insistent about these violations. She says she personally measured your grass at 3.25 inches. That's impossible. I literally measured it myself yesterday. I believe you, but she's the president, and she's within her rights to issue citations. Over the next month, I received 11 more violation notices. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. I'd left a garden hose visible from the street. My garage door had a small scratch that constituted improper maintenance. My recycling bin lid wasn't fully closed on trash day. The citations were absurd, petty, and clearly retaliatory. Each one came with a $50 fine. I contested them all, which required written responses, photos, and increasingly frustrated phone calls with Martha. The stress was affecting my work and my time with Emma. Patricia is trying to force me out, I told my friend and neighbor, Gary Hughes, over beers one Friday evening. He lived 4 houses down and had been in Meadowbrook Hills since the neighborhood was built 15 years ago. She's done this before, Gary admitted. Remember the Hendersons? They put up a fence that was 6 inches taller than allowed. Patricia made their lives hell until they finally sold their house and moved. Everyone knew it was harassment, but nobody wanted to challenge her and become the next target. That's insane. Someone needs to stand up to her. Good luck with that. She's got connections all over Phoenix. Her husband is some big shot at the city council, and she volunteers on every committee she can find. She knows exactly how far she can push people before they break. I took a long drink of my beer, thinking, what if I could prove she's harassing me? That the violations are frivolous. You'd need documentation, and probably a lawyer. HOA disputes can get ugly fast. Gary was right about needing documentation. I started keeping meticulous records of everything. I photographed my property daily, measured my grass weekly, and kept copies of all my maintenance activities. I also started documenting Patricia's visits. She drove by my house at least twice a day, often slowing down to stare at my yard like she was searching for violations. It was creepy and infuriating in equal measure. Then something interesting happened. My neighbor across the street, Linda Ferguson, came knocking on my door one evening in early April. "Frank, I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to ask you about your pond," she said. "My husband Robert and I are thinking about selling our house next year, and our realtor suggested we add some landscaping features to increase the value. We were wondering if you'd be willing to share information about your pond." I invited her in and showed her all my research. She took notes and photos, asking detailed questions about costs and maintenance. "This is perfect," she said. "Our realtor said a water feature could add $15,000 to our asking price. We have a bigger backyard than you do, so we could probably go even larger." "Just make sure you get HOA approval first," I warned her. "Trust me on that," she laughed. "Oh, don't worry. After seeing what Patricia put you through, we'll have everything documented and approved before we dig a single hole." 2 days later, Tom Bradley, the real estate agent who'd written the letter for my board hearing, called me out of the blue. "Frank, I hope you don't mind, but I've been getting calls from homeowners in your neighborhood asking about water features and property values. Word has gotten around about your situation with the HOA, and people are interested. Would you be willing to let me use your pond as an example when I talk to potential clients?" "Sure, I guess. What kind of interest are we talking about? Significant?" "I've had at least a dozen inquiries in the past 2 weeks. People love the idea of a backyard pond, especially in Phoenix where outdoor living space is so valuable. Your pond in particular has become kind of famous in local real estate circles." "Famous? That seems like an exaggeration." "Not really. I posted some photos on my professional Instagram and they went viral. You've got 5,000 likes and hundreds of comments. People are calling it the perfect example of value-added landscaping." I checked his Instagram after we hung up. Sure enough, photos of my pond had been shared and liked extensively. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. Real estate agents from across the Phoenix metro area were tagging clients and discussing how water features were becoming a major selling point in suburban neighborhoods. One comment in particular caught my eye. It was from a woman named Marcia Reynolds, who identified herself as a licensed property appraiser. She'd written, "This pond likely increased the home's value by at least 12 to 15%. In that neighborhood, that's $40,000 to $50,000. Smart investment by the homeowner, $40,000 to $50,000. I'd spent about $8,000 building the pond. That was an incredible return on investment. I screenshot the comment and several others, adding them to my growing file of documentation. I had a feeling I might need them. Sure enough, the following week I received my most ridiculous violation notice yet. Patricia claimed my pond constituted a safety hazard and was demanding that I install a fence around it or fill it in entirely. The fine for non-compliance was $500, with an additional $100 per day until the violation was corrected. This time, I didn't call Martha. I called Mark Williams, the lawyer on the HOA board. "Frank, I'm glad you called," he said when I explained the situation. "Patricia has been increasingly erratic since the board overruled her. She's issued 43 violation notices in the past month alone. The other board members and I have been discussing the situation. She's clearly targeting me specifically. This latest notice claims my pond is a safety hazard, which is absurd. It's 30 inches deep and surrounded by smooth stones. It's safer than most swimming pools." I agree. In fact, several of us think Patricia is abusing her authority. "We're calling a special board meeting for next Tuesday to address the issue. Can you attend?" Absolutely. The week leading up to the meeting was tense. Patricia continued driving by my house multiple times a day. She even stopped once and stood at the edge of my property, taking photos with her phone. When I went outside to ask what she was doing, she just smiled coldly and walked back to her car. "Building my case," she called out as she drove away. Tuesday evening, I arrived at the community center to find the parking lot more crowded than usual. Apparently, word had spread that something significant was happening. I recognized at least 20 homeowners from the neighborhood, including Gary, Linda, and Robert Ferguson, and several people I'd only seen in passing. Inside the conference room, Patricia sat at her usual spot, but her expression was different. She looked nervous, her fingers drumming on the table in front of her. Mark called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming. We've called this special session to address concerns about HOA management and enforcement practices. Several board members and community residents have raised questions about the appropriateness of recent violation notices and fines." Patricia straightened in her chair. "If this is about Frank Keller's pond again, I think we've wasted enough time on that subject." "Actually, Patricia, this is about your conduct as HOA president," Jennifer Moss said firmly. "Over the past 6 weeks, you've issued 61 violation notices to homeowners in this community. That's more than you issued in the entire previous year. I've been doing my job. Enforcement has been lax, and I'm correcting that." David Sherman pulled out a folder thick with papers. "I've reviewed every violation notice you've issued since the last board meeting. Of the 61 citations, 43 have been contested and ultimately dismissed because they were either factually incorrect or based on misinterpretation of the rules. That's a 70% error rate, Patricia." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Patricia's face flushed. "Those homeowners manipulated evidence. They're trying to undermine the HOA's authority." "Actually," Mark interjected, "I've reviewed the evidence myself. In most cases, the violations simply didn't exist. You cited Frank for grass that was within height requirements. You cited the Johnsons for a tree that needed trimming when they'd had it professionally pruned the week before. You cited the Patels for a damaged fence that was actually in perfect condition. I think we need to discuss Patricia's position as president," Susan Harper said quietly. "This pattern of behavior is damaging to the community and exposes the HOA to potential legal liability." Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're going to remove me, after everything I've done for this neighborhood. I've maintained standards and property values while the rest of you sat back and did nothing. Actually, you haven't maintained property values, I said, speaking up for the first time. You've actively worked against them. Everyone turned to look at me. Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. I'm sorry, what? She said icily. I stood up and pulled out my folder of documentation. May I address the board? Mark nodded. Please. I walked to the front of the room and connected my laptop to the projector. After Patricia issued her safety hazard citation for my pond, I did some more research. I hired a professional property appraiser to assess my home's value. I pulled up the appraisal report. According to this licensed assessment, my pond increased my property value by $47,000. That's a 14% increase from comparable homes in the neighborhood without water features. Gasps and whispers filled the room. I clicked to the next slide. I also analyzed recent home sales in Meadowbrook Hills. 3 homes have sold in the past 6 months. I compared them to similar sales in comparable neighborhoods. I displayed the data in a clear chart. Homes in our neighborhood are selling for an average of 8% more than comparable properties in similar communities. Want to know why? I clicked again, showing photos of all 3 properties that had sold. Each one featured significant landscaping improvements, including water features, elaborate gardens, and outdoor living spaces. Buyers are willing to pay a premium for Meadowbrook Hills because homeowners here have invested in high-quality landscaping and outdoor features. The neighborhood has developed a reputation for beautiful properties. Patricia's aggressive enforcement of minor violations and her attempt to force me to remove my pond would have directly contradicted the trend that's actually increasing all of our property values. I looked directly at Patricia. You keep saying you're protecting property values, but the data shows you're doing the opposite. You're trying to prevent the exact improvements that make our homes more valuable. Patricia's face had gone from red to pale. That's not true. Rules exist for a reason. Some rules do, I agreed. But rules that prevent homeowners from making good faith improvements that benefit the entire community. Those rules need to be changed. Linda Ferguson stood up from the audience. I want to add something. Robert and I got approval to build a water feature in our backyard. We submitted our application 3 weeks ago. It meets all the size requirements and follows every guideline. Patricia has been sitting on our application, refusing to approve or deny it. That's because I'm still reviewing it, Patricia protested, for 3 weeks. The bylaws state that applications must be reviewed within 10 business days. Mark made a note on his pad. Patricia, is this true? Have you been delaying applications? I've been thorough. That's not the same as delaying. Another voice spoke up from the back. She's been delaying mine too. I applied to repaint my house the same color it already is, which shouldn't even require approval, and she's been holding up the application for a month. More homeowners began speaking up, sharing their own stories of delayed applications, nitpicking enforcement, and what increasingly sounded like systematic harassment of anyone who disagreed with Patricia's vision for the neighborhood. Mark held up his hand for quiet. I think we've heard enough. I move that the board vote to remove Patricia Newsome as HOA president, effective immediately. Seconded, David Sherman said quickly. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Patricia stood alone. The motion carries. Patricia, you're removed as president. Please surrender the HOA office keys to Martha by the end of the week. Patricia grabbed her belongings, her movements sharp and angry. You're all making a huge mistake. This neighborhood will fall apart without proper leadership. And you, she pointed at me, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the county about your pond. It's a public safety hazard, and I'll make sure the proper authorities know about it. She stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Mark sighed heavily. I think we all need a break. Let's reconvene in 15 minutes to discuss next steps and elect an interim president. I stepped outside for some air. Gary joined me, clapping me on the shoulder. That was something else, man. I've never seen Patricia actually lose control like that. She's going to make good on her threat about the county, isn't she? Probably. But your pond is completely legal. You have permits, it meets all the building codes, and you've got documentation proving it's safe. She's just angry. I hoped Gary was right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia wasn't done fighting. The next morning, I was proven correct. I found a notice from Maricopa County Code Enforcement taped to my front door. It stated that a complaint had been filed regarding an unpermitted water feature on my property, and that an inspector would be conducting a site visit within 7 business days. I immediately called the county office and spoke with an inspector named Carlos Rodriguez. Mr. Keller, I see we have a complaint about a pond at your property. Do you have permits for this structure? Actually, I do. I pulled all the necessary permits when I built it last year. There was a pause. You have permits? That's unusual. Most residential pond installations don't require permits unless they're quite large or involve electrical work for pumps and filtration. Mine has a filtration system and lighting, so I made sure to get everything properly permitted. Well, that makes this easy. Can you email me copies of your permits? If everything's in order, I'll close the complaint. I sent Carlos the permits within an hour. He called back that afternoon. Mr. Keller, everything looks perfect. Your permits are valid. The work was inspected and approved. And from the photos in the file, your installation is actually higher quality than code requires. I'm closing this complaint as unfounded. For what it's worth, someone has filed 3 separate complaints about your property in the past week. They've all been meritless. If it continues, you might want to consider documenting it as harassment. 3 complaints. About what? Let's see. 1 about the pond. 1 claiming you had unpermitted electrical work, which your permits clearly covered. And 1 claiming you'd removed a tree without permission. That last one was particularly odd because the satellite imagery shows no trees have been removed from your property in the past 5 years. Patricia was escalating. Filing false reports with the county was a serious matter, but I wasn't sure what I could do about it without proof that she was behind it. That proof came 2 days later in the most unexpected way. I was at work when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Martha from the HOA office. Frank, I need to talk to you about something, but it has to stay confidential. Can you come by the office today? Is everything okay? Just please come by. After 5, when Patricia won't be here. I arrived at the HOA office at 5:15. Martha looked nervous, glancing around as she let me into the small office. I could lose my job for this, she said, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Patricia has been using the HOA office to conduct what I can only describe as a harassment campaign against you and several other homeowners. She pulled up files on the computer. Look at this. These are all the county complaints filed in the past 2 weeks. Patricia has been using her position on various city committees to file official complaints, then using her connections to try to expedite investigations. The screen showed dozens of complaints. Most were against me, but others targeted homeowners who'd spoken up at the board meeting. There's more, Martha continued. She's been contacting real estate agents in the area, telling them that Meadowbrook Hills is having major HOA disputes and that property values are about to plummet. She's trying to scare off potential buyers. Why would she do that? It hurts everyone in the neighborhood, including her. I think she wants to prove that removing her as president was a mistake. If property values drop or sales slow down, She can say I told you so and try to get her position back. I felt my anger rising. This has to be illegal. Filing false reports, spreading misinformation about property values. Probably, but I don't know what to do about it. She's well connected and I'm just an administrative assistant. You have documentation of all this. Martha hesitated, then nodded. I've been keeping copies, just in case. Would you be willing to share them with the HOA board? They need to know what she's doing. Only if you promise to keep my name out of it initially. I need this job, Frank. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. I promise. We'll find a way to present this information without putting you at risk. Martha burned everything onto a flash drive and handed it to me. Please be careful. Patricia is vindictive, and she doesn't take losing well. I took the flash drive home and spent hours reviewing the files. The evidence was damning. Patricia had filed over 30 false complaints with various county and city departments. She'd sent emails to 17 real estate agents with false information about HOA disputes and declining property values. She'd even contacted a local newspaper reporter, trying to plant a story about HOA chaos in Meadowbrook Hills. The next morning, I called Mark Williams and explained what I'd found. This is serious, he said after I'd finished. Filing false reports with county agencies could be a criminal matter, and if she's knowingly spreading false information that's damaging property values, that could be grounds for a civil lawsuit. What should we do? I need to see this evidence. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon? I brought the flash drive to Mark's law office in downtown Phoenix. He reviewed everything carefully, his expression growing graver with each file he opened. Frank, this is worse than I thought. Patricia hasn't just been harassing you. She's potentially committed multiple crimes. Filing false police reports, making false statements to government officials, and what looks like an organized campaign of defamation. What are our options? We need to contact the authorities. The HOA board should also hold an emergency meeting to address this. But first, I want to consult with a colleague who specializes in criminal law. Can you leave this with me? I agreed and left his office feeling both relieved and anxious. Things were escalating beyond a simple HOA dispute. 2 days later, Mark called with an update. I've spoken with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. They're interested in the evidence, particularly the false reports. They're opening an investigation into Patricia's conduct. How long will that take? Hard to say. Weeks or months, probably. In the meantime, the HOA board is meeting tomorrow night. We're going to discuss taking legal action to protect the association and its members from Patricia's actions. The emergency board meeting was packed. Nearly 50 homeowners showed up, filling the community center's main room. Jennifer Moss, who'd been elected interim president after Patricia's removal, called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. We have several serious matters to discuss tonight regarding the conduct of our former president, Patricia Newsome. For the next hour, the board presented evidence of Patricia's harassment campaign. They'd consulted with attorneys and decided that the HOA needed to formally disassociate itself from her actions and make clear that she was acting without authority or approval. Several homeowners spoke about their own experiences with Patricia's retaliation. The Patels described how she tried to prevent them from installing solar panels, falsely claiming they violated neighborhood aesthetics. The Johnsons explained how she'd filed a complaint with Child Protective Services, making false allegations about their teenage son, because they'd supported the motion to remove her as president. That last revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Making false reports to CPS was potentially criminal and certainly unethical. We need to do something, Gary said, standing up. Patricia can't be allowed to keep terrorizing this neighborhood. Jennifer nodded. The board agrees. We've drafted a formal letter that will be sent to Patricia, notifying her that any future actions she takes representing herself as speaking for the HOA will be considered fraud. We're also notifying all the agencies she's contacted that she no longer has any authority to act on behalf of Meadowbrook Hills. What about legal action? Someone called out. That's being discussed. Mark can explain. Mark stood up. The HOA is considering filing a civil lawsuit against Patricia for damages related to her defamation campaign. If she successfully scared off potential buyers or damaged property values with her false statements, the association could seek compensation. Individual homeowners who have been harmed by her actions could also pursue their own claims. I'm in, I said immediately. She filed at least 8 false complaints against me personally. Several other homeowners voiced their support for legal action. Jennifer made notes and promised to keep everyone updated. As the meeting wrapped up, Linda Ferguson approached me. Frank, I wanted you to know that Robert and I finally got approval for our pond. We started construction last week. We've also had 3 neighbors ask us about it. Your pond has started a trend. That's great, Linda. Just be prepared for the maintenance. It's more work than you'd think. We don't mind. And honestly, after everything you've been through, if our pond helps prove that Patricia was wrong about property values, it's worth it. Over the next few weeks, an interesting pattern developed. 4 more families in Meadowbrook Hills began planning water features for their backyards. 2 others installed elaborate garden designs. The neighborhood was experiencing a landscaping boom, with homeowners investing in improvements they'd previously avoided for fear of HOA retaliation. Tom Bradley, the real estate agent, called to tell me that Meadowbrook Hills had become one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in the area. I'm getting calls from buyers specifically asking about your neighborhood. They love the idea of a community that encourages quality outdoor living spaces. 3 homes went on the market in June. All 3 sold within 2 weeks, each for at least 10% over asking price. The buyers specifically cited the neighborhood's beautiful landscaping and the presence of water features and gardens as major selling points. I compiled this data and presented it at the next board meeting. I know we're dealing with the fallout from Patricia's actions, but I think we should also look forward. The market is telling us something important. Buyers want neighborhoods with character and beauty, not sterile uniformity. What are you proposing? Jennifer asked. I think we should revise the HOA guidelines to actively encourage quality landscaping improvements. Make it easier for homeowners to get approval for water features, gardens, outdoor living spaces. Let's lean into what's working instead of fighting it. David Sherman nodded enthusiastically. I've been thinking the same thing. We could create a fast-track approval process for improvements that meet certain quality standards. The board voted unanimously to form a committee to revise the landscaping guidelines. I volunteered to serve on it, along with Linda Ferguson, Gary, and 2 other homeowners who'd done extensive landscaping work. Meanwhile, the investigation into Patricia's conduct was moving forward. In late July, I was contacted by an investigator from the county attorney's office, Detective Sarah Chen. Mr. Keller, I'm following up on the complaints filed by Patricia Newsome. We've confirmed that she filed at least 12 false reports with various agencies. That's a serious matter. I need to get a formal statement from you about the impact these false reports had on you. I met with Detective Chen and provided a detailed statement. I explained the stress, the time wasted responding to false complaints, and the potential damage to my reputation from having multiple government investigations opened against me, even though they were all ultimately dismissed. Has Miss Newsome contacted you directly since her removal from the HOA board? Detective Chen asked. No direct contact, but she drives by my house regularly, at least once a day, sometimes more. I've documented it. I showed her my log and photos. That could constitute stalking or harassment. Combined with the false reports, we're looking at potential criminal charges. Really, I thought this was more of a civil matter. Filing a false report with a government agency is a crime in Arizona. When you file multiple false reports as part of an organized campaign of harassment that can elevate to more serious charges, the county attorney is reviewing the case now. 2 weeks later, I was at work when my phone rang. It was Mark Williams. Frank, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia was arrested this morning. She's being charged with multiple counts of filing false reports and 1 count of criminal harassment. I sat down heavily in my office chair. Arrested? I knew there was an investigation, but I didn't think it would actually lead to criminal charges. The county attorney takes this stuff seriously, especially when it involves abuse of government resources. Patricia used her connections and her former position to weaponize official agencies against private citizens. That's beyond just HOA drama. What happens now? She'll be arraigned, probably post bail, and then there's the legal process. The HOA is also moving forward with a civil lawsuit for damages. Between the criminal and civil cases, Patricia is going to be dealing with this for a long time. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that the harassment was finally being taken seriously. Guilt that my pond had somehow triggered this whole mess. Satisfaction that justice was being served, and mostly just exhaustion from months of stress and conflict. That evening I sat by my pond with a beer, watching the koi swim their lazy circles. Emma was coming over for the weekend, and I'd promised to take her to the Phoenix Zoo. Normal life was resuming, slowly but surely. My phone buzzed with a text from Gary. "Did you hear about Patricia?" "Holy cow, man, you took down the dragon." I smiled and typed back. "I just wanted to keep my pond." The next few months were relatively quiet. Patricia posted bail and hired an expensive defense attorney. The local news picked up the story, running pieces about HOA overreach and abuse of power. Meadowbrook Hills got more publicity than any of us wanted, but surprisingly, it didn't hurt property values. If anything, the narrative became about a neighborhood that stood up to a tyrant and embraced positive change. The landscaping committee completed its work in September. We presented revised guidelines that created a streamlined approval process for quality improvements. Water features, gardens, outdoor kitchens, and similar enhancements would receive fast-track approval as long as they met basic safety and aesthetic standards. The board approved the new guidelines unanimously. Within weeks, 6 more families began landscaping projects. Meadowbrook Hills was transforming from a bland suburban development into a showcase neighborhood. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for November. The county attorney offered her a plea deal, but according to Mark, she refused it, insisting she'd done nothing wrong. Her attorney was arguing that her actions, while perhaps overzealous, were within her rights as HOA president and a concerned citizen. The trial lasted 3 days. I was called as a witness and spent 2 hours on the stand describing the harassment campaign, the false complaints, and the impact on my life. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Dozens of false reports, emails showing Patricia knew the complaints were baseless, and testimony from other homeowners about her retaliation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw her husband, a balding man in an expensive suit, put his head in his hands. Sentencing was scheduled for December. In Arizona, filing false reports could carry jail time, though first-time offenders often received probation. The judge would also consider the scope of Patricia's conduct, the number of victims, and her lack of remorse. The landscaping changes in Meadowbrook Hills continued to gain attention. A local magazine ran a feature article about the neighborhood's transformation, with photos of my pond featured prominently. The article quoted Jennifer Moss saying, "Sometimes conflict can lead to positive change." Our former president tried to maintain rigid control, but our homeowners showed us that beautiful, well-designed improvements benefit everyone. Tom Bradley called me with exciting news in November. "Frank, you're not going to believe this. Remember how I said your pond became famous in real estate circles? Well, it's gone beyond that. I've been contacted by 3 different home and garden publications wanting to feature it. Are you interested? Publications, like magazines." Exactly. They want to do photo shoots and interviews about how your water feature transformed your property and inspired a neighborhood-wide movement toward quality landscaping. I was skeptical, but agreed. A photographer came out the following week and spent hours capturing my pond from every angle. They interviewed me about the design process, the conflict with the HOA, and how the pond had become a symbol of homeowners standing up for thoughtful improvements. The article was published in February, by which time my pond was part of a much larger story. Meadowbrook Hills had been featured in real estate listings as one of Phoenix's most desirable neighborhoods. Property values had increased by an average of 12% over the past year, significantly outpacing comparable communities. The HOA's decision to embrace quality improvements instead of rigid enforcement had paid off in concrete financial terms. Every homeowner in the neighborhood had benefited from the conflict that started with my pond. Patricia's sentencing hearing arrived in mid-December. The courtroom was packed with residents from Meadowbrook Hills. The judge listened to impact statements from multiple victims, including me. I described the stress, the anxiety of constant surveillance, and the violation of having false reports filed against me with government agencies. Patricia's attorney argued for probation, emphasizing her clean record and her community service history. But the judge was unimpressed. "Miss Newsome, you held a position of trust and authority in your community. You used that position not to serve your neighbors, but to harass and intimidate them when they disagreed with you. You filed false reports with multiple government agencies, wasting taxpayer resources and potentially damaging innocent people's reputations. You showed no remorse throughout this process. This court cannot overlook such egregious abuse of power." The judge sentenced Patricia to 18 months in county jail, with the possibility of work release after 6 months. She also imposed a $5,000 fine and ordered Patricia to pay restitution to the HOA for legal fees and damages. Patricia finally showed emotion, her face crumpling as deputies led her away. Her husband followed, and I felt a twinge of sympathy for him. He'd been caught in the wake of his wife's obsession with control. The civil lawsuit was settled in January. Patricia's homeowner's insurance agreed to pay $75,000 to the HOA to cover legal fees, investigative costs, and general damages. Individual homeowners, including me, received settlements ranging from $5,000 to $15,000 depending on the extent of harassment we'd experienced. I used my settlement money to expand my pond, adding a small waterfall and additional aquatic plants. Emma was thrilled with the improvements and spent hours arranging rocks and choosing new fish. "Dad, this is the best pond in the whole neighborhood," she said one sunny Saturday in February. "I don't know about that. The Fergusons have a pretty amazing one now, too. Okay, maybe tied for best. But yours was first, so you win." I laughed and pulled her in for a hug. "We all win, kiddo. That's the point." Spring arrived, bringing with it a neighborhood-wide garden tour organized by the HOA. 23 homes participated, showcasing their landscaping improvements. My pond was a featured stop on the tour, and I spent the day talking to visitors about water features, fish care, and the importance of creating balanced ecosystems. The tour attracted over 300 visitors from across the Phoenix metro area. Several local news stations covered it, positioning Meadowbrook Hills as an example of successful community development and homeowner engagement. Jennifer Moss was interviewed for one segment. What started as a conflict over one resident's pond became an opportunity to reconsider what we wanted our neighborhood to be. We learned that trusting homeowners to make thoughtful improvements, rather than micromanaging every decision, created a more beautiful and valuable community. Property values continued to climb. By March, homes in Meadowbrook Hills were selling for an average of 18% more than they had a year earlier. Real estate agents specifically marketed the neighborhood's distinctive character and commitment to quality outdoor living spaces. I ran into Mark Williams at a neighborhood barbecue in April. "You know, Frank, when you first came to me about that violation notice, I never imagined it would lead to all this. Neither did I. I just wanted to keep my pond. Sometimes the right fight at the right time changes everything." Patricia tried to maintain control through fear and rigid enforcement. "You showed there was a better way." I had a lot of help. The board, the other homeowners, people like you willing to stand up to her. "True. But you were the catalyst. Your pond became a symbol of something bigger." As summer arrived, bringing Phoenix's brutal heat, my backyard pond became a gathering place. Emma's friends loved visiting and feeding the fish. My neighbors would stop by in the evening to enjoy the sound of running water and the sight of the koi gliding through the clear water. Gary and his wife hosted a pool party in June, inviting most of the street. As we stood around their backyard, someone raised a toast to Frank and his pond. "May we all have the courage to build something beautiful and the stubbornness to defend it." Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. I felt Emma squeeze my hand. "You did good, Dad," she whispered, looking around at my neighbors, at the beautiful yards and happy faces, at a community that had come together and chosen beauty over uniformity. I had to agree. The fight to keep my pond had cost me time, money, and stress. But it had also built something more valuable than any of us expected. Patricia had tried to maintain property values through control and conformity. Instead, we discovered that trust, creativity, and individual initiative created something far more valuable. A neighborhood where people wanted to live, invest, and build their lives. My pond was still there, its koi grown larger and more colorful. The plants had matured, creating a lush ecosystem that attracted birds and butterflies. The sound of the small waterfall provided a constant peaceful backdrop to my evenings. But more than that, the pond had become proof that sometimes the right thing to do is stand your ground, trust your judgment, and refuse to let bureaucratic pettiness defeat thoughtful improvement. Patricia had tried to remove my pond to maintain her vision of order and control. Instead, my pond had helped remove her and replaced her vision with something better, a community that valued beauty, individuality, and the courage to defend both. As I sat by my pond one evening in late summer, watching the sunset reflect off the water's surface. I thought about how far we'd all come. Patricia was serving her sentence. The neighborhood was thriving, and my pond was exactly where it belonged, in my backyard, increasing my property value and bringing joy to everyone who saw it. Emma was visiting again, and she sat next to me, feet dangling over the edge of the pond. "Dad, did you ever think your pond would cause this much trouble?" "Not in a million years, kiddo." "Was it worth it?" I looked at her, then at the pond, then at my house in this neighborhood that had become a real community through struggle and eventual triumph. "Every second," I said. And I meant it.